How many people do you think actually have a net worth of $500,000 or more? 5%? 10%? Half the country. Ask around, and the answers fly in from every direction. Some people picture a tiny elite group tucked away in expensive zip codes, quietly sitting on piles of money. Others assume inflation and rising home prices have dragged almost everyone across that line by now. $500,000 has this strange psychological duality. It sounds enormous, like real wealth, yet it also feels oddly attainable, like something you're supposed to reach if you've lived responsibly for long enough. And that tension between how big the number feels and how common people assume it is where the confusion starts. Because once you look at the real data, and more importantly, what that number is actually made of, the story becomes far more uncomfortable than most people expect. Today, we're breaking down how many people truly have a $500,000 net worth, who those people actually are, what their wealth usually consists of, and why this milestone is far less powerful than it sounds. And before we go any further, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, because this is one of those conversations that permanently changes how you think about money. Let's start with the simplest question. How many households in the United States have a net worth of at least $500,000? Based on data from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances and analysis from firms like Smart Asset, the answer is roughly 29% of U.S. households. On the surface, that sounds shockingly high. Nearly 1 in 3 households seems to suggest that financial stability is far more widespread than we're led to believe. But that first impression only holds if you ignore what the word household actually means. A household can be a married couple. It can include adult children living at home. It can even include multiple earners sharing one roof. When assets, retirement accounts, and home equity are combined across 2 or 3 adults, reaching a $500,000 net worth becomes far more achievable than doing it alone. When you shift the lens from households to individuals, the picture tightens quickly. Looking at individual net worth, meaning one person's assets minus their debts, the share of people with $500,000 or more drops to around 15%. Now we're talking about roughly 1 out of every 6 or 7 people. And even that number hides a deeper truth. Because most people imagine a $500,000 net worth as a pile of invested money quietly compounding in the background. That image is almost never accurate. In reality, the majority of people who technically have a net worth of $500,000 do not have anywhere close to that amount working for them. Most of it is locked inside a single asset, their home. And this is the detail that completely changes the meaning of the number. To understand why, you have to understand what net worth actually measures. Net worth is simply everything you own minus everything you owe. Your house, your car, your retirement accounts, your savings, your personal property, minus your mortgage, credit cards, student loans, and any other debts. It does not measure liquidity. It does not measure cash flow. It does not tell you how much money you can access quickly or how much income your assets generate. It is a snapshot, a theoretical calculation of what would remain if you sold everything and paid off every dollar of debt. So, when we say that 15% of individuals have a net worth over this amount, what we often really saying is that their home has enough equity to push them over the line. Let's take a common example. Imagine someone who bought a home for $300,000 years ago. Today, it's worth $600,000. And they still have a $100,000 mortgage. That's $500,000 in home equity right there. In a small retirement account and some savings, and their net worth easily surpasses the $500,000 mark. But are they rich? Can they live off that wealth? Absolutely not. Their day-to-day financial reality is likely no different from anyone else's. Their wealth is illiquid. It's stuck in the walls of their house. They can't spend their home equity at the grocery store. They can't use it to pay for a medical emergency unless they sell their home or take out a new loan against it. This is why you see people who are paper rich but cash poor. Their balance sheet looks impressive, but their bank account tells a very different story. They feel the pressure of rising property taxes and home maintenance costs, but don't have the liquid assets to easily cover them. This reveals the big misunderstanding. Net worth is not the same as financial freedom. So, who are these people with a $500,000 net worth, really? They're not necessarily jet-setting millionaires. More often than not, they are older Americans, typically in their late 50s or 60s, who have been paying down a mortgage for decades while property values have soared. They're your neighbors, your colleagues. The people who did everything right by traditional standards. They worked hard, saved a little, and bought a home. The system rewarded them with a high net worth on paper, but it didn't necessarily grant them financial independence. This distinction is crucial because it changes how we should think about our own financial goals. Chasing a high net worth for its own sake, especially one dominated by your primary residence, can be a trap. It can create a false sense of security while leaving you vulnerable to unexpected expenses or a downturn in the housing market. A more powerful goal is to focus on building liquid net worth, which are assets that can be easily converted to cash. This means investments in stocks, bonds, and other financial instruments that generate income and can be sold without uprooting your life. Your home is a place to live, and while it can be a great long-term investment, its primary purpose isn't to fund your retirement. The real measure of financial strength is not just the size of your net worth, but its composition. How much of it is working for you? How much of it is accessible? How much income does it produce? A person with a $200,000 investment portfolio might be in a much stronger financial position than someone with a $500,000 net worth tied up in their home. They have more flexibility, more options, and more real, spendable wealth. So the next time you hear that figure, $500,000, remember the story behind it. It's less about a mountain of cash and more about the roof over someone's head. It's a milestone for sure, but it's not the finish line. True financial security comes from building a portfolio of productive assets that give you freedom and choices. Don't just build your net worth, build it wisely. We hear that nearly 30% of households have a net worth of $500,000 or more. Sounds impressive, right? But what does that number really mean? For most people, it doesn't mean they've saved and invested their way to that figure. It means they bought a home, paid down the mortgage, and watched prices rise. For decades, housing appreciation has been one of the biggest drivers of household wealth in America. In places like Hawaii, about 70% of the average household's wealth is tied up in home equity. In Massachusetts, it's over half. Even in more affordable states, home equity often makes up around half of total household wealth. So that $500,000 net worth isn't a pile of cash or a booming stock portfolio. It's a house. A valuable house, yes, but one that's incredibly difficult to turn into usable financial power without selling it or borrowing against it. Let's break this down. Imagine two people, both with a net worth of exactly $500,000. Person 1 owns a home worth $750,000 with $450,000 left on the mortgage. That gives them $300,000 in home equity. The other $200,000 is in retirement accounts, savings, and their car. Now, person 2 rents but has $500,000 invested in a diversified portfolio. On paper, they look identical. But in reality, their financial futures are completely different. The renter's $500,000 is working for them every single day. The market is open. It's compounding. It's generating returns. It's flexible and accessible if an emergency pops up. Historically, a well-invested portfolio can double in value in less than 10 years, even without adding more money. That creates serious financial momentum and opens up a world of options. Now, let's look back at the homeowner. Their home equity grows much more slowly. Over the long term, residential real estate tends to appreciate around 3 to 4% per year. And here's a kicker most people miss. The return on your home equity actually goes down over time. When you first buy, a small bump in home value can give you a huge percentage gain, because your equity is small. But as your equity grows, that same appreciation gets spread over a much larger base, so your effective return drops. Home equity inflates, but it doesn't multiply. This is why two people with the same net worth can be living in totally different financial worlds. One has assets that are actively growing and working for them. The other has wealth that's real, but it's locked away. It's valuable, but it's not productive beyond providing a roof over their head. This brings us to one of the biggest misconceptions in personal finance: the idea that owning an expensive home automatically makes you rich. Living in a beautiful, spacious house feels like wealth. Emotionally it is, but financially it's a different story. A home isn't designed to be a growth engine for your money. It's not a retirement plan, and it doesn't generate passive income. It can certainly support your financial life, especially once it's paid off, but it won't aggressively build your wealth or fund your lifestyle. Think about how truly wealthy investors approach money. Consider Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's legendary partner. Munger wasn't impressed by flashy assets or paper wealth. He always stressed the importance of productive assets, things that generate cash flow and compound over the long term. His fortune wasn't locked up in luxury homes. It was in businesses and investments that earned money year after year. Munger understood that wealth tied up in unproductive assets might look good on paper, but it doesn't do much for you unless it's working. This mindset gets to the heart of the problem. A big net worth number means very little if it's not attached to assets that are actually compounding and growing. It's the difference between having your money sitting still and having your money work for you. Hitting a $500,000 net worth is a huge milestone, but here's where it gets a little concerning. It can create an illusion that a large part of the population is financially secure, when in reality, many of those households are way more fragile than they appear. Think about it. A family with most of their net worth tied up in their home might look strong on paper, but they could still be just one job loss, one medical emergency, or one economic downturn away from serious trouble. Their wealth exists, but it's not flexible. Age plays a massive role here. A young person with a $500,000 net worth, they're in a fantastic position. Time is on their side, and compounding can work its magic. But for someone in their late 50s or early 60s, that same amount is a much tighter situation. Federal Reserve data shows the median net worth for households nearing retirement is somewhere between $365,000 and $410,000. The median retirement savings, that's closer to $200,000. So $500,000 at that age isn't dramatically ahead, especially if a huge chunk of it is the value of their house. This leads to another dangerous assumption, that once you hit $500,000, the path to $1 million is basically guaranteed. And yeah, that can be true, but only if that money is actually invested in assets that compound and grow. If you have $500,000 invested in the stock market, history shows that average returns could get you to $1 million in under a decade. But if most of that wealth is locked up in your house, your cars, or other low-growth assets, that easy glide path just disappears. There's also a psychological trap that comes with hitting this number. Seeing a big net worth figure often creates a sense of complacency. People feel like they've made it far enough, so they stop optimizing, they stop pushing. But if that wealth isn't actively working for you, complacency can quietly grind your long-term progress to a halt. Your home's value doesn't compound like investments do. It can stagnate, it can fall, or it might not even keep up with inflation in real terms. And here's another reality that gets overlooked. Net worth doesn't pay the bills. Cash flow does. You can have a high net worth and still be struggling month to month if your income does uncover your expenses. So many households with significant home equity are still living paycheck to paycheck because their wealth isn't generating any income. This gap between perceived wealth and actual financial security is one of the biggest issues in personal finance today. So, When you hear stats like nearly 30% of households have a net worth of $500,000 or more, you really have to look deeper. How much of that is actually invested? How much of it is liquid and easily accessible? How much of it is producing income? How old are the people who hold this wealth? And how vulnerable is it all to economic shocks? Once you start asking those questions, that comforting headline number starts to unravel. The truth is, only a small fraction of those households have $500,000 in investments. Only a fraction have any meaningful passive income. And only a fraction are truly on a fast track to becoming millionaires. For everyone else, $500,000 is a checkpoint, not a destination. It represents progress, but it doesn't guarantee safety. It shows potential, but it doesn't mean you've achieved financial freedom. The lesson here is, NT, that $500,000 is insignificant TTs. Absolutely a major achievement and a sign of incredible discipline. But it should never be confused with being financially set. Net worth alone just doesn't tell the whole story. Without understanding where that wealth is stored and how it's working for you, the number can create a false sense of security. And that, right there, is the most concerning part. It's not about how few people reach this milestone, but how many believe that reaching it means they're safe. True financial security comes from having liquidity, strong cash flow, resilience to shocks, and consistent growth. Until all of those pieces are firmly in place, even a $500,000 net worth can be far more fragile than it looks. Thanks for watching, and if you found this helpful, be sure to like and subscribe for more.